Hello and welcome. The goal of this podcast is to get listeners connected with others in the sports industry because they say it's all about who you know, and now you know us. All right, everyone, here we go. Thanks for joining us today. This is another episode of the Constant Sports Podcast, episode number 58. Joining us today is Craig Angelos. He's the athletic director at Hawai'i University. He was appointed in May of 2023, and he has 30 years of senior leadership experience across multiple universities like Temple, South Florida, Florida Atlantic, and a number of others. And today we're going to dive more into his background, as I just alluded to, Hawaii's recent full-time membership move into the Mountain West Conference, other athletic director duties and things, landscape of college athletics and all the good stuff. So we're going to jump right into it here. Regarding kind of so as we're in the NIL space, right, you kind of have the donor fatigue. It seems to be somewhat of the main driver in especially college sports nowadays, especially. But maybe talk to that a little bit about the donors and then putting, I guess, money with the fundraising aspect and still kind of helping along with that as far as the school goes, but then also with the NIL initiatives as collectives and different
Right.
NIL institutions are saying, oh, hey, by the way, help us fund this movement or match this project and things like that.
Yeah, it's the need for infusion of money into one's program has never been more greater than it is now. I mean, certainly conference realignment has we've seen that recently, and people are chasing realignment for one reason, and that's to improve their financial situation generally with their media contracts. But as you're seeing now, with the House settlement, people are having to pay into that $2.8 billion House settlement, so they're losing money now that they're having to pay into it. But then also with the scholarship limits going away and having to be roster sizes, now scholarships and those elements along scholarship amounts can increase dramatically now, because you can give scholarships up to the number of roster spots on your team. So football can go from 85 full scholarships to 105 full scholarships. Baseball is 11.7. Now they can go up to 34. Men's volleyball here is really big. They're at 4.5. They can go up to 18. So if you think at the University of Hawaii, it's $40,000 basically for a scholarship. So if you take 20 scholarships up in football, 85 to 105, that's 20 scholarships times $3,000. That's about $800,000 more just in that particular sport, and that's reoccurring over every year. So you have that element, like where are we going to get money there? Along with the House settlement, you have the revenue share aspect of it now, where schools will have to share revenues with their student athletes. Well, that's all additional money too. So even if you were balancing your budget on those two elements, you're going to have to find more money for scholarships, and you're going to have to find more money to rev share. Even if you were balancing your budget, regardless if your budget's $100 million or $200 million, you're still going to have to find more dollars than you're used to. And so then you also switch over to the fundraising side. You're always trying to raise more money for your program to fund those things I just got done talking about, additional scholarships, various things like that. But then you also have the NIL on top. So you want to be supportive of the NIL. And so even though a donor might be giving you, $50,000 in a corporate sponsorship or a donation, and now they say, listen, what we're going to try to do is give 25 over here to the collective and 25 to you. You've got to be excited about that. It's like, oh, that's fantastic news. That's great. We're building that collective. But on the drive home, you're like, I just lost $25,000 towards my foundation or my fundraising goal this year. So we're all very conflicted because we want to be successful in all those areas. We want to be able to provide those more scholarships that we're talking about. We want to be able to do the rev share that we're talking about. We also want to bolster the NILs and the collectives that are out there, but we also need to balance our budget too. So there's all these conflicting forces going together, and as an athletic director, for example, you're trying to figure out how are we going to operate in this space? Where are we going to go? Which direction are we going to go with limited amount of money? So and you're right, the donor fatigue, they're seeing some of this stuff too, and they're being pulled in a lot of different directions, especially do we give it to the school, do we give it to an NIL situation, a collective? So it's a difficult process out there right now, and you do see donors, getting a little fatigued along the way, as you're saying, And I can also see if donors are paying into a collective, for example, and they're not seeing the result they want on the field, do they continue to pay in that collective, or do they take a step back and say, I'm not going to invest my money over there anymore? So there's a lot of issues to address for sure.
Yeah, well, and since you took over there at Hawaii, was it is June? I think around June 2023. A lot has changed, specifically on the conference realignment side, and I know specifically for your university. It was about 2 weeks or so ago. You guys joined the Mountain West, so I'm sure that was a long back and forth, thought out process. But what did that kind of look like? Making that move. Did maybe I know there's a lot of travel and things, and I've heard you on other podcasts talking about different fees that you're gonna have to incur and different buyouts and payouts, but
Right.
maybe a kind of a synopsis of that process and a little behind the scenes.
Yeah, Hawaii was in the WAC about 25 years ago,
Right.
all of their sports. And then, of course, when the Mountain West bolted and took some of those schools out of the WAC, Hawaii was not one of them, but they were able to get into the Mountain West Conference for football only. And part
Hmm.
of the deal was that allowed them to get into as football only is they promised to subsidize the travel for the teams coming over to play them in football. And so that still has remained in place for the last probably 25 years at least, where we would pay the schools in the Pacific time zone $150,000 to come over and play us in football, and the schools in the Mountain West time zone or the Mountain time zone would give we'd give $175,000 a year to in subsidies, and so that has worked well, and we've been a proud member of the Mountain West in football only. But also, we are in a pretty good situation with our rest of our sports that we're in the Big West Conference, which is basically a California-based conference. You got five Cal State
Cal
schools,
State.
five UC schools, and so that had worked well too, because all of our teams, from our tennis teams to track to baseball, softball, basketballs, would just have to take the 5-hour flight over to California and play a school over there. And so that has worked well too. Now, also we do pay the Big West subsidies also, probably the tune of maybe $500,000 or $600,000 a year to the conference that spreads it out over the teams that come over and play us. And so, in summary, though, with our subsidies, we're paying about, depending on what years we play what schools in football, whether we pay them 150 or 175, and the amount that we're paying the Big West, we're probably paying 1.1, maybe 1.2 million a year in subsidies for those teams to come play us over in the regular season. And that doesn't include the non-conference games, which we're also
Right.
paying subsidies for people to come over. And so when the Mountain West, has when that started, we thought, well, where should we end up? What should we do? What's best for our program? Because if you think about it, the Mountain West hasn't been touched with conference realignment at all, and even the Big West. So from our vantage point, we hadn't seen conference realignment at all. But then it came knocking on our door when those 4 or 5 schools from the Mountain West decided to go join the Pac-12.
Mhm.
And so we wanted to see what was best for us. Some people thought, oh, stay in the Big West and go independent in football. Well, that wasn't a viable option out here in Hawaii. Some thought we should try to get into the Pac-12. We did talk to the representatives of the Pac-12 and had discussions with them, but between the exit fee of $17 million and the poaching fee of $13 million is pretty much a $30 million proposition to extricate us out of the Mountain West. And of course, was the benefit there in the Pac-12 with the perceived, television package, which was not finalized yet, and no one really quite knows where that will land. But we thought the best option for us at the right time, would be to stay in the Mountain West Conference for all of our sports.
Mhm.
So the net effect of all this is now our teams that are playing in the Big West Conference will now be playing in the Mountain West Conference. And part of that deal was we could avoid paying subsidies now, both going forward in the Big West as well as the Mountain West. So that was a win for us. Probably get a little bit more money, but it did create, probably most importantly, it created stability for our program going forward, because we had all of our sports into a full FBS conference, and one that we think we can be successful in, that's treated us well. We hated to leave the Big West because they've been very good to us. Now, I will say there are some sports that we're going to try to leave in the Big West if they will allow us to do that,
Mhm.
and they're going to vote on that, and that would be men's men's swimming, men's volleyball, water polo, and and one other sport. There's four sports there that would be required to or that would stay in that
Stay over
conference
there.
if they allow us to do it. So uh, so that if they allow us to do it, we'll be in a good spot. We'll have our other teams in the Mountain West, and we'll have those teams in the Big West, and it'll work out well. So, but it was a difficult process because we've had a pretty good situation, but we just felt from the stability of it and maybe a little bit of better financial package that made sense to put all of our sports into the Mountain West.
Yeah. No, yeah, I love it. I love to see kind of the moving and grooving and the shaking, kind of shaking it up and also keeping, like you said, a lot of the sports together and in the same conference, but then having those few outliers and talking a little bit about kind of financial packages and different plans and things like that. While you were at FAU, I read you implemented a over $160 million kind of facilities master plan with, dorms and retail space and parking. And I feel like sometimes when people think of athletic directors, I mean, that's kind of like a real estate mogul type of move with dorms and parking and things like that. So when people think of athletic directors, they might not think of those types of moves. But what did that look like when you were trying to build that plan and build that master plan of we're going to put this here and the parking here and a giant endeavor such as that.
Yeah, that was quite a great interesting project, and I can't say that I developed that myself. I kind of replicated that from the University of Central Florida because
Mm.
there was an athletic director by the name of Steve Orsini, and he was doing a public-private partnership up at UCF, and you
Okay.
see where it is right now. If
Mhm.
and you see where they're in the Big 12. I mean, that was really the beginning. He was really the beginning of that ascension in their program. But we were a young program at Florida Atlantic University, and we only had a football program that was in place maybe for 2 years, maybe a
Wow.
year before I got there. And we were playing at the Miami Dolphins football stadium. We were
Mhm.
playing at a county soccer stadium. We had no stadium on our own campus, but we had plenty of room on our own campus. And so the discussion was like, we need to build a stadium on our campus, like every other school, especially for the long-term growth of the football program. And so we came up with a lot of different ideas. That football coach at that time was a guy named Howard Schnellenberger. He kind of talked about a dome stadium,
Mhm.
where and I kind of seized on that when I got there, and I took our donors and others up to Syracuse, and we walked through the Syracuse Carrier Dome and said, how about if we build a smaller Syracuse Carrier Dome type of thing right here in Boca Raton, Florida? Instead of having 50,000 like they do in Syracuse, we'll do it 40,000. We'll also play football. We'll play football in it. We'll also play basketball in it, just like they do at Syracuse.
Mhm.
So we were all in on that project, had the drawings going, et cetera. It just seemed to be a little bit more expensive than we could afford. But it took me about 7 or 8 years to figure out how to get it done. And we finally did get it done. But we ended up doing a public-private partnership like they did at UCF, where we built dorm space, we built retail space, and we built parking. And we took those revenues to try to help we put towards building the stadium, and then we bonded out the rest. And our bond our debt service turned out to only be $2.5 million at
Wow.
the end of the year, or at the end of the day. And that was an incredible financial project, I thought. But I mean, it was things like, we were winging it at the time. We were
Mhm.
like, we have extra land here. We had these developers that wanted to come build these high-rise dorms that had a pool there that looked really nice. And it's like, how I said, but I need $12 million upfront cash to put towards the stadium project. Will you give me $12 million upfront cash? Okay, we'll give you $12 million. They stroke you a check for $12 million and you're on your way. And that was the beginning. And they built those two nice dorms, towers, as you will, if
Mhm.
you will, the swimming pool there. It looked like a resort area, really, right across from the stadium. We put some retail in, built some parking, and it's still continuing to go on now, even later. But we got the stadium up, first class stadium. I mean, I was kind of winging it, like we're gonna have bowl games in here, we're gonna have concerts in here, we're gonna have soccer in here, etc. And it turned out to be true. They did get a bowl game in afterward. They were playing some World Cup soccer friendlies in there,
Oh,
at
wow.
least World Cup teams, not World Cup the tournament, but
Mhm.
you know different countries,
Yep.
some concerts. So you kind of cast that vision, like we got to figure out a way to do it, and then you slowly figure it out as you go. And that's the beauty of an athletic director is, your day is different every single day. But with that project, it was difficult. I mean, it was, you feel like you're pushing a boulder up the hill, asking for people to help along the way. And I think a lot of people did not think it was ever going to happen. And we're like, no, you're good. You go, you're fine. And they were afraid, I think, that it was going to roll back on them, so to
Yeah.
speak, and crush them and look like a failure of a project. And so some people didn't really want to get behind it, but the president at the time got behind it, and others started to get behind it. As we got further up the hill, other people started getting behind it, and pretty soon we were all able to push that boulder off over the top and give high fives and say great job. And so it turned out to be quite an amazing project through kind of replicating what UCF had done through this private public partnership, and we're able to make it happen. So I think that's what they're trying to do here at the University of Hawaii. I got here a little later, and I think they're trying to do the same thing as a private-public partnership here in the University of Hawaii. Same kind of thing as an entertainment district, housing, entertainment, hotels, that kind of thing, along on the outside of Aloha, the new Aloha
Yeah.
Stadium we want to build. So very similar project that they're already engaged in trying to do here is what we had done at Florida Atlantic.
I see. Well, yeah, that kind of leads me to my next question. That might have kind of been the answer. But with those types of projects and things, and now that you joined UH, are there any, I guess, unique challenges or unique projects that excite you, kind of on the horizon?
Well, for sure here at Hawaii, because the original Aloha Stadium that was up for 50 years kind of went in disrepair after COVID,
Hmm.
and UH was told that they couldn't play there any longer because it wasn't structurally sound. And so they had to make a pivot real quickly and kind of build a temporary stadium around their track here on our campus. And they did a nice job. They started out at 9,000 and now it was up to 15,000 when I first got here. And it's very functional. I mean, it looks good on TV. It's very
Yeah.
functional. It has suites, premium seating. I mean, it's pieced together, but it's very functional. But the idea was to try to build a new Aloha Stadium project, and they called it stands NASED is the acronym for it, New Aloha Stadium and Entertainment District.
Okay.
And so the idea is to tear down the old Aloha Stadium and build that entertainment district down, the Stadium and Entertainment District down there where the Aloha Stadium was originally. And so they've gone through that same process of the procurement process to try to get developers that want to be part of it. And they're down to one developer that they're going to name who feels that they can bring this to pass. And then we'll have like about 9 months to negotiate with that developer to see if a contract can be entered into, and everything, the financials will look good and it will work. The great thing about this particular project, though, is the state has already allocated somewhere between $350 to $400 million for this stadium. So the developer can use that to build the stadium. Anything on top of that, they would have to fund, and then they would fund the entertainment and housing district and all that around it. And so it's a gigantic project, but it could be great for the state if we can pull it off.
Mhm.
And so that's where we are currently at now. And if it comes to pass, we'd be playing football in that new stadium in the fall of 2028.
Okay.
We have developed other plans, though, contingency plans, that if it does fall apart somehow, that we have some other ideas and some contingency plans we can turn to immediately. But we do need to get something up in that regard. We're also looking at, some our lower campus where our athletic facilities are, to try to improve some of them that we have, try to build some more, maybe build a student athlete performance center, some practice fields with football. So we've got some opportunity there. So again, it starts with a plan, and we got a plan. It's just a matter of whether we can, what it looks like at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it'd be really cool to get the Pro Bowl. I was, playing there as a kid, watching it looked, super fun. And I'm sure that the NFL guys appreciated going down there to Hawaii and, enjoying the beach and doing that whole deal. So that'll be fun to kind of watch that project grow and continue to build. Is that common that a state will allocate that much money, $300-400 million to a project like that?
I think it's very uncommon. I've never
Yeah.
really seen it happen. I mean, the great thing about Hawaii is that we're the only Division I institution
Right.
in the state, and there's no pro sports teams uh, to follow either. So the state is all in on their university and their sports program. They really support it very, very well. And so the legislature has been very supportive over the years and continues to be here with allocating this money for it. So it's a great opportunity for us because, like I mentioned, at other stadiums, Florida Atlantic, when they built theirs, North Texas, when they built theirs, you're seeing Northwestern's going to build one. Usually, the process is you go out and have to raise the money to do
Yep.
it by selling naming rights, by just getting pure donations. Eventually you're going to sell the suite levels, the club level, every element you're going to try to sell along the way. But then after that, you go and you bond out the rest, and then you're
Mhm.
paying debt service every year. And so that's how most of them are done. The Snapdragon at San Diego State was done that
Yep.
way. Uh, and so to have that money allocated on the front end is very, very rare, and that's why we're very fortunate to have that there. But we'll see where this ends up. We'll see where
Okay.
it ends up. But at least we have a good good amount there to work with, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, no, yeah, obviously seems like a great starting point to
Yeah.
already have that much money kind of, ready to rock and roll. And but before we wrap up here, Craig, we appreciate you jumping on today. And for maybe those, I guess, future or aspiring athletic directors or those who want to work kind of in the athletic admin space, what are some, some parting advice for them to that they kind of hang their hat on?
Yeah, everybody has a different pathway up here to being an athletic director. I know a lot of people aspire to do that. There's only 134, I believe, FBS athletic directors, and it's very difficult to get. I always say the sun and the moon and the stars all have to align to be able to get these kind of jobs. But you got to bring, I think, a few things one has to consider. You got to get an expertise. You got to be able to bring something to the table. Everybody comes and usually works their way up through the system. Some are people from the outside and they get appointed over to be an athletic director. That's very seldom, though, and few and far between. They're generally not as successful that way because even though they may be great in business or law, running their corporations, intercollegiate athletics is such a different animal. And you've seen a lot of people try to make that transition over that have just been overwhelmed with how difficult it really is. So generally the path has been, if you look at the direction of most of the sitting athletic directors, is they get into the industry in some form or fashion. They might be a fundraiser. They might get in on the other side of compliance. They might be selling tickets, and then they work their way up to be really good, and then over a certain amount of divisions within their athletic department, and then raise up to be, maybe the number 2 or 3 person, raise up to be the number 2 person, and then get the opportunity to go be a number 1 person somewhere. But you got to develop an expertise. You also have to have the work ethic, and you got to be able to move around too. A lot of times you're not going to be able to get in the same place and move around. I've seen that affect a lot of people, that they'd like to do these things, but do they really want to move around the country as much?
Yeah.
I have 6 children, and I was one of those that was going to move around the country. I was going to go to wherever the opportunities were, and they all came with me, and we all had a great time doing it. But you have to, sometimes you have to move your way up the system to different places. Very seldom can you go from the entry level job up to the athletic director job all at the same place. That generally doesn't happen. So you've got to be able to be mobile. You've got to be in it for the long haul, because there's ups and downs. Anytime there's leadership changes, that can affect you. You've got to overcome a lot of difficult situations and have that drive, that determination, that resiliency to move your way up the system. But you also have to be good, and you
Yeah.
got to put yourself in a position. You got to learn. You got to be good. You got to be a student of the game. I would align myself with some great leaders like that who can teach you, you can follow, and grow from. But it's possible. It's possible. You just got to be in it for the long haul. Take some time to move your way up through the system.
Mhm. Great, yeah, great advice, and I love kind of hearing that, and I guess just from kind of doing some of the research before this show here, I saw you've been all over the place, Long Island, Temple, Florida, Indiana, so really speaking that into existence there. So I appreciate you jumping on the show today, Craig, and talking about college athletics, sports, and especially all the cool projects that are happening at the University of Hawaii, and really, like I said, really appreciate you coming on, and we're looking forward to the fun projects, and hopefully in 2028 we'll be able to see a new stadium out there.
I'm hoping a lot of good things happening here. It's a great time to be at the University of Hawaii. So, a lot of good support out here, and got some plans, and hopefully we can make it happen.
Yeah, no, for sure we'll do. And like I said, looking forward to that. And thanks for all the listeners and viewers. And this has been another episode of the Constant Sports Podcast.